Thanks for being with us here on Business Now. Last week we highlighted the ongoing pay gap between men and women. And because of those pay gaps, the other consequence is the retirement savings of women will not be as great as men unless that gap somehow is narrowed. But that retirement savings outcome, superannuation if you like, will also be affected by the time out of the workforce to have or to raise children. The government's now committed to pay superannuation on the government paid parental leave payments in an effort to close that gap. So here's Finance Minister Katie Gallagher at the Press Club today.
We will need legislation to pass, so that needs to be done, and we need to get the systems in place about how it's administered. We've got a bit of a window now where we can talk with people about how that will best work, but it will be in the budget. It will be published as a decision taken in the budget, and we will deliver it.
But is this move alone enough to close the gap? We're going to go through this and try and explain it to you. Mary Delahunty is the Chief Executive of the Association of Superannuation Funds in Australia and joins me now. Mary, many thanks for your time. I mean, closing the gap, it all seems to be sort of one thing to talk about the closing of the gap and the aspiration. The reality is that people work in different ways, and that may make it difficult to truly close this gap over the longer term.
Thanks, Ross. Yes, there is a persistent gap to be closed, but this decision today goes some way towards that. And so we are really thankful and very happy to see it finally taken. It's been a long time that superannuation, the broad ecosystem have been asking for this. It's got wide public support as well.
Yeah, so you can see here on the screen that I've put up the balances at rest of people aged 60 to 64. Men have 120,000, women have 88,000, a difference more than 32,000. As for I know, you do your own surveys of this. Do you see similar things as well?
We find across the various funds, you'll see a median average balance for men of about 212,000 at age 67, for women at about 159,000, so about a 25% difference. So a lot to close, and you know, as you say, some difficulties in doing so.
So there is, one is the pay gap, right? The difference in pay between men and women, and that the aspiration is to close that. The second is clearly time out of the workforce when families have children and to raise children. That can also create that gap as well. Now, this is aimed at trying to partly improve that gap when people are out of the workforce. That's the key, isn't it?
That's the key with this particular measure, and it is. It's also a matter of fairness, and I know that fairness doesn't go a long way to close a gap, but it's important to note that this is the only form of commonly taken workplace leave that doesn't attract superannuation entitlements until this commitment was made today and until we see the legislation passed and it in place. And so, yes, it makes a difference to women's retirement outcomes, but it also helps us, I think, to have more of a meaningful conversation about the contribution women make in unpaid caring roles more broadly. And that perhaps will open up some chances, or at least some form of a conversation about how we compensate more broadly for that too.
So I wanted to put up some of the rules here just so people understand this. So at the moment, this paid parental leave comes of 20 weeks of paid leave. That was increased last year. For a single income earner, they must earn under $168,000, give or take, to qualify. If they're a family, under $350,000. And they must have worked 10 months out of the previous 13 months before they've given birth. So there are hurdles there for people to be able to qualify for those payments.
We do see around 180,000 families taking advantage of these payments every year. So it is a worthwhile step. Because of the increased SG rate and because of the superannuation guarantee rates, that's the amount that comes out of your wage towards super, and because of the increase of minimum wage, that's where the calculation's done on. This will be more significant as time goes on.
So I did a little
difference to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did a little calculation on that. We can see it on the screen now. So the payment, which is about $882 a week, is worth, over that 20 weeks, $17,600, give or take. The superannuation guarantee contribution is 12% of gross pay. So in this regard, the superannuation payment over that 20 weeks is about $2,118. Is that broadly the sort of amount of money that the government's now contributing?
So that sort of calculation needs to be done properly at budget time, and I think the government is committing to showing us all of those figures at budget time. We imagine that makes a difference in retirement to a woman's savings outcome of around close to $4,000 at retirement age. That's on one child. Mostly, there's a two children sort of decision made. Sometimes at age 29 and then again at age 31. That's kind of what we base our calculations on. And if you're looking at that and then pitching forward to that retirement outcome, you're getting close to a $10,000 difference for a woman at her age 67. So it's quite significant, I think.
Which is the important aspect of this. Now, just to say the budget measure that Katie Gallagher committed the government to today, this is going to cost some $668 million a year extra to the government. Now, the interesting question here, I guess, that many people want to know is whether it should be the government who pays this or whether it should be the employer who pays this. After all, it's the employer who also benefits by having that person come back into the workforce, and many employers already have their own paid parental schemes, which I guess are going to already attract superannuation, aren't they?
Yeah, we have the figure at closer to 300 million, but all that remains to be seen. I think what's the important thing to note here is that this is the calculation done on the government's version of the paid parental leave scheme. There is also employer-based paid parental leave schemes available to people who have a relationship with an employer. That leave and that entitlement doesn't attract superannuation yet either, but almost 80% of employers pay superannuation on their portion of the leave already. So this one's on the government version of it. And there's one thing I think to note when we talk about the cost to the taxpayer, and that is the importance of understanding that at the end of someone's working life, there is also a cost to the taxpayer. So
yeah, that's so true as well, Mary. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's an absolute important thing. I've got to say, I've got to wrap it there. I apologise, but it's about fairness. That's exactly what you spoke about. And Mary Delahunty, I appreciate your time today.